Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Herbert, your host. And with me today is the Honorable Lou Schiff. He's judge with the 17th Judicial Court of Florida, located in Broward County. He teaches law and the business of baseball. He's co-authored the book, Baseball and the Law, and Case Materials. It's a law book there, boys and girls. He's a lifelong fan of the game. Lou and I have talked in the past. Big Mets fan, I know, starting out, and moved to Florida. Marlins fan as well. Welcome, Lou. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Mark. I'm doing great. We're just hoping that this lockout will soon end and we'll be able to talk about what's going to happen for the year. But right now, it's not looking very good.
No, it's not. You know, I was looking at rough notes I'd written prior to the show, and I'm saying, when there's a significant change in the environment, you know, we live and work in, smart people look forward. You know, they look to history, too, to see what's happened, but they look forward. You know, and the really smart people say they've seen it long before it's coming and saw that history and done something about it. There hasn't been enough of that as far as this lockout and work stoppage. We're going to take a look at some of the history and see if we can learn a few things. Looking at the 94-95 baseball strike, what came of that, what was in play, and who were the players. And one of them is going to be that lady we heard at the very beginning, and that was Justice Sonia Sotomayor. The thing about that, at that point, I guess she was still a federal judge. And we're going to talk about one of the things she did as a federal judge. First off, let me ask you a few things here, Lou. As a fan of the game, I know you started out like as a Mets fan. Is that correct?
I did. I started out as I started out as a Yankee fan. That only lasted a year or two. And then the Mets started, and I guess it was like 1964 when I started rooting for the Mets, 64, 65, rooting for the Mets. And stayed a Met fan, even though we moved to Florida in the early 70s, stayed a Met fan until the Marlins were formed in 93. And I became a Marlins fan in 93, and I haven't looked back since.
Well, Lou, I mean, that was a real critical time when you think about it. Here's this brand new team in 93, the Marlins. Here you are also with the Mets history that you have there. Suddenly, there's a strike in the middle of August. Well, as a fan, do you remember your feeling, what that was all about?
But, you know, 93 being the first year, the Marlins drew over 3 million people their first season. It would take like 4 seasons now to equal that, but they drew 3 million people the first year, which is to show you how much Florida will support baseball. And then, you know, of course, the strike in 94 put a damper on everything, put a damper on me as well. You know, you're expecting baseball, and now this happens, and a lot of people just left. A lot of people just left the game. People didn't want to be part of it. Greedy owners, greedy players.
Oh, yeah.
People were lining up on either side, some lining up on no side, just blaming the parties, saying you really can't get your act together on this. And then we look at today. Today is a little bit different because today is not a strike. Today is a lockout. There's a difference. The players are not on strike. Their contract has ended, and the owners have elected to say, okay, you can't come in. Owners have effectively, and they have locked out the players from doing anything until they have an agreement. When will that agreement be? I read just yesterday or the day before yesterday, some people don't think it's going to happen right away. Some people think we're not going to see baseball in April. If you do see baseball in April, maybe you'll see some spring training games. But the parties seem to be miles apart right now. Again, they're going to lose fans. It took a lot to get the game back on track. Baseball is extremely popular here in the United States, and as well as in other nations. Canada, in the Caribbean, Mexico, and South America. Baseball has grown internationally.
Oh, yeah.
More and more players, about a third of the players or so playing baseball right now are not from the United States and Canada. Baseball's become a worldwide sport. And I'm neglecting Japan and Korea as well, how baseball has grown as well over there. Many of the American players finished their careers playing over there. And so what is this going to do to the average fan? Maybe somebody like you or I, when we were kids, 10, 11 years old, you'll go find another sport to watch.
Yeah.
You'll go find another sport to play. because people aren't going to wait for baseball. There's other sports. There's other places to spend your money.
And that's true. I can tell you from talking with friends over the years, and they said, "Oh, you're doing the show baseball biz." I said, "Yeah." I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, I haven't looked at baseball since '94." I said, "What?" No, they turned their back on me, and I turned my back on them. I mean, it was like as a family member who's had a long time dispute where there's not going to be any coming back to it. And I fear that if this continues, that may happen again. And a sport that has fallen from popularity as basketball emerged and as football emerged as popular sports, I don't know, man. I feel like sometimes they're taking a poison pill with this. And I'm not judging either side right here because I'm not sitting in that room. But there's a history here, boys and girls. And when I look at that, I got to say, how did you let this happen? And we're going to talk about Sonia Sotomayor and how she had to face this and what judgment she had to make. But I know looking, Lou, at the game itself, and you've talked about how it impacted you. One of the things I was looking at also is saying, what was happening that year? And one of them was the Montreal Expos. Here's a team that had been rebuilding for some time and slowly but surely was trying to get there. But it didn't happen. I mean, they could have possibly been a World Series team. They'd been on let's see, taking a look here. They had a really good season that year. 74 wins and 40 losses.
Mm-hmm. They're on their way. They're on their way to the playoffs, and many people were picking them to win a World Series.
Yeah, they had a 650 winning record. When they finally came back, they had 66 wins and 78 losses. 10 years later, they're called the Washington Nationals, and it killed them. It absolutely killed them. And you look at Tony Gwynn and the Padres. He was closing in on Roger Maris's record, and I think he'd played about 110 games, and I think Roger Maris, I'm trying to think what he had, but he had about a 400. He was closing in on a 400 bat.
He was closing in on a 400 season.
Yeah, and Matt Williams, I think he did like 43 home runs as well. So there was a lot of players, there was teams, things that were happening that could have been very exciting. To see Montreal Expos in the World Series and perhaps win it, that would have been amazing.
Yeah, Tony Gwynn was hitting. He wound up hitting 394 for the season. He may not have hit 400, but it would have been an incredible ride, that's for sure. And that all got pulled. Fans just lost. People just lost interest in the game.
And I hope that's not going to be what happens again. If we look back at that 94-95 strike, it had several little elements into it, and maybe you and I can kind of walk through some of that.
Sure.
Because it was in August, and depending on which team and how far you were into the season, you'd probably played 113 or 117 games, somewhere in between all that. So you're going to be coming up. Here's August. September's going to be here, and October's going to be here. There's going to be a World Series, before you know it. But the player said, August 12th, let's walk. Everybody steps off the field. That's it. What were some of what was the motivation? What were the points that players felt so strongly about that they walked away?
In hindsight, hindsight's always the great teacher. Salaries, arbitration, some of the same things that we're talking about. We're talking about today.
Yeah.
Free agency. These are the same exact things that we're talking about today. I believe the players thought that this would make the owners want to come to a table. We have seen, though, that the value of baseball franchises have gone through the roof. Case in point, you take the Atlanta Braves. When Ted Turner bought them, he paid $10 million for them. When he sold them, he got $400 million for them. And last year, Forbes valued the team at $21 billion.
That's amazing.
That's a lot of money. Baseball owners are wealthy. There's only 30 of them. Maybe there'll be more. Maybe one of the things they want to talk about is expansion again. I don't think players are going to strike over the designated hitter rule.
No, I was
You
finished.
know, that's nothing to strike about. You know, will they add a 27th player to the team?
Yeah.
Team owners who say they can't afford to add a 27th player to a team are just not being genuine. You would think that how well baseball has done, and not necessarily, you know, the ballpark attendance is down, but what's up is revenue from TV, and cable, and radio. Revenue is up from Major League Baseball properties, the jerseys they sell, the experiences they have. That's all up there. Memorabilia is costly. They have that authentication service that they use. So now you know when you buy a baseball that's been autographed by a certain player and it has that magic little sticker on it that you can go online and actually type it in, and they say that it is what it is. That's something Major League Baseball started doing, I guess, right around. They hired this funny story is, you know, they hired Arthur Anderson, the firm, to authenticate all they were the first firm to authenticate it. And of course, Arthur Anderson is the firm that went down based on Enron. Not exactly the best choice of people to hire, I guess, to authenticate your stuff. But they have, you know, they've used great marketing. And now this is all going to fall apart. It's a shame. It's just a shame, because baseball has become, and it's the name of your show. It's the business of baseball. Yeah. Baseball is a business. It's a sport that kids play. You played it. I played it, but it's a business. Baseball's facing another big lawsuit from these Staten Island Yankees, or the former Staten Island Yankees, because now they're down to 120 affiliated teams instead of 160. You would think that there's enough money to go around for everybody for some reason.
You know, a lot of people, I think, like to position, well, it's billionaires against millionaires. And I don't look at it that way. I look at it as just a fair practice. And people who look at things from a corporate or a business perspective have to respect that. Guess what? That's what the players are looking for. They're looking from a business perspective. They're like saying, my stock is worth more. My stock is worth more right now today. Right. And I, as a business person, and that's what that, you know, free agent is, they're negotiating, you know, what that value is. And to impede that is kind of a challenge. So I want to look back again at that 94, 95 strike, because those are some of the values that were being challenged.
Yeah, let's take a moment here and pause and hear what Sonia Sotomayor had to say as she was being confirmed for her position as a Supreme Court justice and her relationship with baseball.
Few judges can claim they love baseball more than I do, for obvious reasons. But analogies are always imperfect. And I prefer to describe what judges do, like umpires, is to be impartial and bring an open mind to every case before them. And by an open mind, I mean a judge who looks at the facts of each case, listens and understands the arguments of the parties, and applies the law as the law commands. It's a refrain I keep repeating because that is my philosophy of judging, applying the law to the facts at hand. And that's my description of judging.
And as a federal judge, Sotomayor went ahead and brought baseball back. Or as President Obama would say, she saved baseball.
Well, so if we talk about Justice Sotomayor, what's an interesting thing about her is to see how she got where she got. She was nominated and appointed by President Bush, George H.W. Bush, to be on the trial court.
Right.
The Southern District of New York. And this is where she made her name for herself as the woman that saved baseball. So as a federal trial judge, she served for about 5 or 6 years. She was appointed by a Republican. Then in 1997, around then, President Bill Clinton appointed her, or had her appointed to the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. And then in 2009, President Obama nominated her for the United States Supreme Court, where she became the first woman of color and the first Hispanic to ascend to the level of a justice. So here we have a justice who was appointed by 3 different presidents from both parties. Not sure, without me stepping on that third rail, not sure we might see that right now,
Right.
from our elected representatives, but this is certainly a throwback to a different time when things were a little bit different. She was confirmed by a 68-31 vote to sit on the Supreme Court. So, but what her fame was as a trial judge was forcing the players and the owners to get back to work and saying, you're going to go back to work and you'll figure it out, but you're going back to work. And she supported the ruling of the National Labor Relations Board. And then, of course, her ruling was challenged in court and she was affirmed, but she was the person that broke the logjam to move it along to get baseball back. And so the question is, well, if she wasn't such a big Yankee fan, if she wasn't such a big, the Yankees had to throw out a first pitch. In our book, we have a picture of her throwing out a first pitch at Yankee Stadium. If she wasn't such a big baseball fan, you wonder would she have ordered them back to work? And I think the answer is still yes, but she had a great understanding of the history of the game in order to do it.
I think that's enlightening. I mean, yes, she was a Yankees fan, but I look across a lot of the judicial and certainly even the Supreme Court justices, how many baseball fans have been there, especially look at like Blackman and some of the other ones, and you read like the book, The Brethren, they're passing notes on the score during a trial. And
during the World Series, right. During the World Series, they're passing notes as to who's winning. I often said, and this is before Chief Justice Roberts said it, but when people talk to me about being a judge, I always compared it to being a baseball umpire, calling balls and strikes. And then, of course, during Justice Roberts' confirmation hearing, he says that, and of course, he's quoted, nobody remembers that I said it. I said it before he said it, but he never heard me say it, so he said it first. But I've always compared what I do to being an umpire, the same way that Justice Sotomayor has said it as well, because you do come in and the job is to be impartial, and it's to apply the law to the facts as you see them and make your decision. And there are times when a judge makes a decision that they personally might not agree with the decision, but they're duty bound to follow the law as it applies to the facts in the case.
When at that point, Judge Sotomayor, said, guess what? The strike's over. Everybody goes back. You still need to figure out this CBA, collective bargaining agreement, but go back to work. Right. What was the NLRB, the National Labor Review Board, what were those findings that were being challenged or that she actually answered, I guess, during that case?
Let me give it to you from the case itself.
Gotcha.
So the National Labor Relations Board made a conclusion that free agency and salary arbitration were mandatory subjects of bargaining, and that because the clubs unilaterally decided not to bargain that way, that was unfair labor practice. And that Judge Sotomayor ruled that an injunction was warranted, which is forcing them to go back to work. As a result of her ruling, the players on April the 2nd of that year, they officially called off their strike after 232 days and agreed to go back to work without a new collective bargaining agreement. On April 4th, the Second Circuit, which was the appellate court to Judge Sotomayor, denied the owner's request for a stay of her ruling. In other words, they said, no, she ruled, we are not going to touch this. If you think there's relief necessary, we're not going to enjoin the relief that she gave you. Then on April the 25th, there was an abbreviated spring training. The regular season began and the schedule was shortened down to 144 games that season. And then very quickly, when I say quickly, this is quick for an appellate court. At the end of September of that year, the Second Circuit affirmed Justice Sotomayor's ruling. And then a month later, the Atlanta Braves went on to beat the Cleveland Indians in the World Series, which was the Braves' only World Series win until just a couple of months ago. Finally, in December of 1996, the new collective bargaining agreement that began and it covered the period between January 1, 97 and December 31st, 2020, and that was finally approved. So what the courts did, and this would have been no different if it had been a railroad strike. It would have been no different had it been a teacher strike. The courts basically pushed everybody back to work. Justice Sotomayor said, no, everybody needs to get back to work, and then you can negotiate. So that's what she did. She stopped the strike. She forced everybody back to the bargaining table, and we've had, not we personally, but baseball has had pretty much peace. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the next month or two. But this is not a strike right now. This is a total lockout by the teams. And the players haven't sought any judicial relief as of this point, and neither have the owners.
And that's I think a real hurting point for a lot of the fans. It's when you see that they're in an impasse. We see sometimes two political parties that are so polarized, trying to get anything done is very difficult. And a good parallel when you look at what's going on with the owners and the Players Association. They seem to be so polarized. I don't know if they're ever going to get there. And I hate that it has to go to a law case. I hate that, in some cases, whether or not the president got involved. It seems insane that two organizations can't get together and make sure that they remember who's the most important person in this mixture. It's not the owners. It's not the players. It's the fans. And
it's the fan.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no professional baseball if people don't want to show up to buy what you sell. And other victims, so to speak, of the player strike are the players themselves. You take a player that you only have so much of a window to play ball, and you're now not getting paid for a year. Many of the players that struck in 94 never played baseball again. That was the end of their career. Many minor league ball players that would have had an opportunity, even for a cup of coffee as a call-up, never had that opportunity either. So there are a lot of folks that, and we really won't read their names, but there are a lot of folks that either never got a chance to play or whose career ended earlier as a result of the strike.
Well, and that's a good point. And I know right now there's not a whole lot of Major League Baseball news, and maybe that's why I'm seeing a lot of it. We're seeing a lot of players who are retiring now, and you mean the international signings, which is kind of amazes me the other day. Oh, we're having international signings. Well, that's great.
The international signing started. So this is the great part, I guess. So international signing begins, and allegedly the teams aren't supposed to have any contact with any of these players before the signing period starts. So the signing period starts at 12:01 a.m. All of a sudden, the team signs a ball player. Wow, isn't that amazing how they were able to find a ball player in 1 minute, and that player agreed to that contract with that team in 1 minute? I just don't know how that happened, but you're not supposed to have any contact with any player before then. But miraculously, within a minute of everything happening, they're signed.
It's crazy, Lou. I mean, and I don't know. I don't have high expectations of everybody following the letter of the law. And I find it interesting, too. While they won't use players' images and they won't actually supposedly give them any help, like if they're injured or anything else right now. But I hear that they're also still running drug tests on those same players, the Major League. It's I won't necessarily say hypocrisy, but say contradiction. We'll do that. The contradictions of some of the things that are happening. It's like, as a fan, you just shake your head. And I know you and I are more fans than some of the typical ones who are expecting, who don't pay attention till opening day, and then it ends at the World Series. But there's a lot happening in between. I
try to pay attention. I have to tell you, the last couple of weeks, I haven't paid a lot of attention. I figured when they settle, but I got ready for our talk today. So I started taking a look at some things, but I'm getting frustrated. I want to read about some teams signing some free agents. I want to find out about how bad my Marlins are going to be this year, in spite of the fact that we're going to have some really great pitching. Okay. Right. The National League East is going to be the toughest division in baseball. And that may be a biased statement, but after last season, it's going to be a real tough division. Maybe American League East is going to be second toughest. I don't know. And that could be my East Coast bias. I mean, there is a bias. I think about it,
Oh, yeah.
You don't get to watch, the disadvantage of living on the East Coast is that you don't get you can't stay up for a lot of those California games because I can't even finish the East Coast games. Never mind waiting for the West Coast games to start. So, the only time you really see the West Coast games is if you're really paying attention to them. At least if you're on the West Coast, the East Coast games you get to see at 2:00 in the afternoon or 3:00 in the afternoon, whenever, and then you get to see your games as well.
And I remember growing up as a kid, I could get home around 3:00 and I might see a game here in the East. But there's so many things I feel like where baseball has moved toward, and understandably, toward broadcasting and trying to make sure everybody's home from work, that younger audiences who may have watched the game earlier in the day don't get to stay up to 1 in the morning or midnight.
I think the perfect example is the World Series. I went to the World Series this year in Atlanta with my wife. It's the first World Series that I've been to since the Marlins played in 2003. And here's a confession. We left Game 3 early. That was the Friday night game that was drizzling the whole time. And even though we had stuff on, my wife was soaked, and it was midnight and we were absolutely soaked, and the game was over as far as what the score was going to be. So we left. But how do you stay up? If again, you're that 12-year-old kid, the kid jumping up and down with Gil Hodges on the screen behind me, when the Mets won the World Series in '69. How do you jump up and down as a 12-year-old kid when the World Series is over at 12 or 1:00 in the morning? Baseball has got to do a better way of bringing in the youth of our country to enjoy the game. It's difficult to stay up. Start the games early. There's nothing wrong with a 2:00 first pitch for a World Series. I get it. Maybe Friday night they want to play a night game, but Saturday and Sunday World Series games starting at 8:15.
That's ridiculous.
And especially a Sunday game when the next day is school. Again, maybe it's an East Coast bias because the kids on the West Coast get to see a game at 5:15, but you're half the nation's population is East. You're giving up a big share of kids wanting to watch, and folks like me that have a hard time staying up past 10:30.
Yeah, sign me up there too, brother.
All right, Mark, you're on that same.
Yeah, I'm watching the game, but I'm also DVRing at the same time in case I.
Well, yeah, you can record it, but that means you have to not answer your phone, not turn on your computer, not turn on your phone in the morning. You just have to go with blinders and hope when you turn the TV on for the DVR, it doesn't hit the station that's telling you the score of last night's game. I couldn't finish watching the Alabama-Georgia game when it was on. I mean, my eyes are, there's nothing I can do. I'm jumping around. It's like I just can't stay up.
I hear you. And, and the other part of that too is by watching the recording of it, Lou, I'm finding myself and saying, well, it's sort of like eating fresh baked bread that comes out of the oven. But even though what the DVR, it still should be fresh, it's tasting like 10-day-old bread. I know that it's already happened. There's something
special about going to a live sporting event.
Yeah.
And there's something special about watching it live, on TV. When you watch I was, the other day, maybe it was yesterday, the day before, I was watching the first, I was watching ESPN, and they were broadcasting the first Jackie Robinson game from 1997 with the Mets and the Dodgers. and Mike Piazza was catching for the Dodgers at the time. And Bill Clinton was on as a guest during the game when he was president. And, that was fun to watch, 25, 26 years later. But just a run of the mill ball game from the night before, I'm not sure I'm going to want to sit through the whole thing.
No. But it has been interesting. I mean, I hate that there's a lockout, but with MLB saying, we're not going to use any images of the players on right now because that's part of the lockout. And there's been some question back and forth on it. But we've been the beneficiaries by seeing some of these classic games that the MLB network is putting up. So I've enjoyed some of those and some of the specials and the Ken Burns specials and all that. But give me back live, real baseball. Give me a good opening day, brother. Come on. Let this happen to us.
I got an email from the Marlins the other day telling me that I'm eligible to buy spring training tickets. And I hit the delete button, and it's like, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to use my regular season tickets. Never mind, they want me to spend extra money on a spring training game that may or may not ever happen.
Oh, I hear you. I was trying to see the Braves when they come down here for spring training, and I'm right down the road from where the Detroit Tigers have theirs. And I thought, I could get this anywhere from $49 to $150. $49, that doesn't sound bad. But will I ever see that game if I spend it?
Still, that's a lot of money for a spring training game.
Yeah.
$49 for a spring training game. That really is. That's an awful lot of money to see players that are not going to be with the team.
There you go. I'll wait for the fun thing though. I mean, Lou, if that sadness happens and there isn't a regular MLB season, there can still be a minor league season. Guys that are on they're not on that 40-man roster, we can see those guys play.
Or you could watch independent baseball. The American Association of Independent Baseball comes to mind. My friend Josh Schwab is the baseball commissioner there. They're having baseball whether there's a lockout or not.
Yeah. Wow. Looking back to talking about other teams and other leagues, I think it was around 94, 95. Maybe even Kurt Flood and some others were looking at trying to establish another league simultaneously, not because of the strike, but I think there was like a USFBL, something like that. They were trying, who knows if we ever see anything else emerge. But
do you remember when the Florida had the senior baseball league?
Oh, yeah.
They had teams in South Florida, and so guys in their late 30s and 40s, maybe 50s, were playing. I think it lasted two years, maybe. They played here in Fort Lauderdale, the old Fort Lauderdale Stadium, and I think they played up in West Palm Beach. That stadium's not there anymore, but that's where the Expos and the Braves used to play. And they had, and I think they maybe been playing in Pompano. They had the Sunrise. I forget what they called it, but there was some guys, and they made a few bucks, and they had a senior league for baseball.
I'd pay a good price for those. I mean, there's so many players that don't make it or who leave early, as you were saying earlier. I would pay to see those. So we'll see what we have to do as fans. I mean, we may have to make some hard choices. I'm not buying any gear right now, guys. I'll let you know.
Well, Mark, I'm not buying any new team jerseys or any new team hats, Mark. I'm going to stay with what I have, and I hope that on March 31st I'll be able to watch the world champion Braves play the Marlins in Miami.
I'm with you, man. That would be fantastic. It's got to be an exciting time, and I hope that all the fans get to enjoy that. Before we go any further, I would like to take a look back at the book that you've written. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So it's been out for about 5 or 6 years already. It's called Baseball and the Law: Cases and Materials, published by Carolina Academic Press. And we're thinking of going with a soft cover edition. I don't think there's a lot of hardcover left. The price of printing books has gone up tremendously.
Oh yeah.
In the last couple of years. It was I call it the most fun I ever had writing a term paper. It turned out to be over 1,000 pages, but I co-wrote it with Professor Bob Jarvis from Nova Southeastern. We did it because there was a need for a textbook like this. It's been used in law schools throughout the United States. We were honored by SABR, and they named it the Baseball Research Award that we received. a couple of years back for the research and the writing of the book. It's not just a law school case book. It's more like an encyclopedia. I've had some people refer to it as a tome, which is a compliment. You don't have to be a lawyer to like what we put in the book. There's a lot of easy reading. You can cut out the cases and there's still 400 pages of information. We trace back the origins of baseball in the United States. We talk about the first case ever involved with a baseball. We talk about everything up until the end of the 2015 season. There have been obviously some changes. I'd like to do a second edition, but got to convince my co-author to do that. The publisher says they're game for it. It took us a couple of years to put it together, and I'm hopeful that if we can't put a second edition out, maybe we can put something out similar to it that talks about baseball and law. It's been fun. I'm on Twitter at baseball and law, at baseball and law. Nice little following, about 2,600 followers. It's nice. Actually, I put it out there at the suggestion of Art Shamsky. He was like, well, why don't you have a Twitter account to go with your book like we do? And it's like, well, I never really thought about it. And so that was 3 years ago. So we're coming up on our third anniversary. And every morning at about 7 o'clock, in advance, I type these up and I have them ready to go. A daily tweet about baseball and law. Today's tweet happens to deal with George Steinbrenner. Many people don't realize that in addition to all the problems he had with the Yankees and getting suspended by Major League Baseball, he had a little run-in with the courts in the United States. He was convicted for improper campaign contributions, dealing with the 1972 Richard Nixon re-election. And in 1989, right before President Reagan was handing the keys over, President Reagan, 2 days before he left office, pardoned George Steinbrenner for any of his sins as a person. Another story for another day. I think I told you that I worked for George Steinbrenner when I was an undergraduate at the University of Florida for 2 years, 1975 and 1976. I was the public relations director, 1 year the assistant director, and then the second year in 76, I was the public relations director for the Fort Lauderdale Yankees, which was, looking back on it now, it's like that was like a dream job.
Oh yeah,
absolute. There weren't any formal internships like we have now. I literally wrote a letter to the Fort Lauderdale Yankees. We lived nearby in Sunrise. I went in, I met with what then was the general manager, and they go, "Yeah, kid, you want to come in here, hang out? Sure, we'll let you do stuff." And then the next year, I was the director of public relations with my soon-to-be journalism degree, and then I turned down a job offer from Mr. Steinbrenner. And I went to law school instead. The rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. We're going to have to do another episode just on that, because that's exciting. Talking about how
it was
coming
a fun
into
2 summers. It was a real fun 2 summers.
Oh, brother. Well, Lou, I can't thank you enough for joining us here today. Again, we've been speaking with Lou Schiff, and if you haven't checked him out on Twitter, you should. And what's that handle again?
At Baseball and Law.
All right. I love it because I do the knowledge that you share every day, some historical stuff. It's like, dang, did that happen? Like the Steinbrenner stuff today. So, yeah, check that out. And again, Lou, thank you, buddy. It's always great to have you here on Baseball Biz.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I look forward to having you again real soon, my friend.
Anytime.
You've been listening to Baseball Biz. As always, you can find us on your favorite podcast directory, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and more. Thanks again, and remember you can also check us out on Twitter at TheBaseballBiz. Take care and have a great week. Special thanks to X-Take RUX for the music rocking forward.